Yep, we can hear you.
That was really easy there. So good work on the tech, Connor. Thank you all for coming. We have a lot of recurring faces to this committee today, and we've got some new ones. My name is Katie Pekarik. I'm an extension educator with the University of Nebraska. I am also a liaison with the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. I am one of the co-chairs of this subcommittee. This is the Water Quality Subcommittee of the NRCS State Technical Committee. And I feel like after I've said all of those correctly, I should get a sticker and a prize. So thank you very much. Because we do have new faces that are continue to join us in this group, and we're really thankful that there are new faces here. We're just going to quickly review the goals of the subcommittee. Yeah.
You can co-chair.
Okay. And
Spokesman.
no, okay, so we've got two co-chairs of this committee. One is myself, and Roar Coleman here is our co-chair. We were gonna get to that over. So we're gonna review the goals of the subcommittee. We are gonna go around and do some introductions because part of the goals of the subcommittee are some relationship building. And at least knowing who's in the room and where we're coming from is a really good, helpful piece of this. So the goals of this water quality subcommittee are really twofold. The first goal is to provide some guidance to specific programs for NRCS, specifically to our state office. So with that, we get to review some specific programs, understand those more as a committee, and then make our recommendations and suggestions. The second goal is a little bit more broad, and the idea of the subcommittee is that we can provide some creative thinking and some broad concepts that may help us with collaboration and moving the goals of the NRCS and our state and our collaborative agencies forward. So with that, our agenda today reflects that. The first part of the agenda will be reviewing some of the specific programs and questions that came up in previous subcommittee meetings. And then the second part of the program today, the meeting, will focus on collaborative ideation, facilitation, brainstorming. It'll give you an opportunity to kind of see what we can get through from some of those parking lot issues we've had in previous meetings. So with that, we're going to go around the room. Introductions. I'm going to have Warwick start the introductions. If you want to give your name, a little bit about who you're representing, and if in one or two words, you could give us an idea of what broad thinking concept you would like to discuss today. So what's one word or two words of an issue that you'd like to see us discuss today?
No way.
One, you go. You can have two. You can have two. I'll allow it.
Rory Coleman, I'm a producer from Southwest Nebraska. I'm a third generation. Fourth generation is currently running. We're about a 10,000 acre 80% groundwater irrigated out of the Ogallala in 3 NRDs, the upper, the middle, and then the Twin Platte. As part of our operation, we're primarily a large popcorn grower. That is the main crop. We are all no-till, but I'm going to be the first to tell you that we're going to have to break the cultivator out. A little tough. There's some things that the reason I said it here is because I believe that water quality, not just from the programming, the programs that have existed within NRCS and within the state have addressed and done a nice job with, but this continuing increase in nitrates in particular in our irrigation water and drinking water is a legacy that I don't want to be a part of. I want to be a part of a conversation and a solution, or at least thought process, because I was a part of the collaboration with the IMP from the Platte and the Republican for almost nearly 20 years now, and we got something done on the quantity side. So how do we do this same model or this same concept around the quality piece? And that's why I'm sitting in this room and got up at 4 o'clock this morning to drive here.
All right, I'm Connor Ward. I'm the EQIP program manager for the NRCS here in Nebraska. Today, these meetings, I need to hear how we can better set up our USDA programs and whatnot to meet the needs of the group and landowners across the state. So It's kind of the goal here is within our policies and what we can do, how we can better set up our programs to treat what we want to treat, so. I got.
I am Tammy Norton. I am the admin for the program Soils and Wetlands Division. With NRCS. I'm just here to take minutes, so. Can keep these guys in line, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, I just say, Tammy, you've got a very important job. You've got a lot of things floating out here we gotta capture, so. Brad Sonk's assistant, state conservations for programs for NRCS, and, kind of the broad overall today, like, probably every one of these committees. I'm interested in what can we do to make a change on water quality. We're voluntary incentive-based practices, and I just want to get to the point to target and identify practices and places.
Tom Mountford, I'm a fairly recent in a way, it's already been 6 months, working with NRCS on a part-time basis as a watershed project specialist, mainly work with watershed projects after a 36-year career with the NRD system and looking for something to do, and this opportunity came up, and I was very familiar with the WQI program while working at Lower Platte North and the Wahoo Creek. Very passionate about water quality, what that accomplished over the years, and had an opportunity through this job to help the team, WQI team at the NRCS level, and all of you with whatever input I can and help out along the way. And all those things Brad said is what I'm trying to assist with. So glad to be here and hope to be able to contribute.
I'm Fred Stevens. I work with NRCS. I'm state program specialist. I've been tasked with going around to the different NRDs and help coordinate and help to redevelop our NWQI plans and to also work with our partners and to provide a service to producers and to help with water quality.
My name is Dave Stroller, and I'm with Nebraska Rural Water. Our office is out of Wahoo. I'm the source water protection specialist for that association. And I work with the public drinking water sectors or water operators in the small towns and villages in Nebraska. And I kind of focus my time and energy on talking about contaminants and where do they come from. We all know about nitrates, but there's like 140 other contaminants that the operators have to sample for. And when they show up in their sample results, they want to know, well, what happened? How did they get in there? So that's what I focus on.
Jennifer Swanson with the Nebraska Association of Resources Districts. For me, it's just having the conversations of new approaches we can take to address the nitrate and maybe thinking outside of the box and how we can leverage everyone's resources to accomplish that.
Hello, everybody. Rachel White here with Nebraska Corn Board, Director of Innovation and Stewardship. I'd say, my role being here, this will be my first meeting here, so glad to be here, is really grower engagement in the sustainability realm. So, if I can assist in helping to make these opportunities more approachable to growers, these opportunities, more easily accessible, so growers can continue to improve on how they do what they do, then hopefully I can assist.
Hi, I'm Brett Weiser with NRCS. I supervise a team of technical specialists in our state office. And I guess the one thing I want to visit about is I'm on the agenda today for 10 minutes. So I guess that's the topic I want to visit about today.
Hi, I'm Renee Hancock. I am the NRCS State Water Quality Specialist. Brett's my supervisor in the state office there. One topic I want to bring up that this group haven't discussed yet is E. coli.
Morning, I'm Dick Erman. I'm the Water Resources Coordinator for the Lower Platte South NRD here in Lincoln. Katie, I don't know if anybody listened to you. You only wanted 1 or 2 words, right? Yeah.
Get it as concise as we.
If I'm going to do one word, I'm going to say sales. We need to figure out a better way to sell the idea of working towards water quality and keeping that foremost, not just in farmers' minds, but in everybody's minds, and how we can sell that idea better than we have.
Albert Trailer, I'm with Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy and our non-point source program. I guess what I want to see on the committee, this committee, is that we kind of collectively really honestly define a problem, and then we honestly bring our collective minds together and say, how do we make forward progress in solving those problems?
My name is Marty Stein, and I'm the environmental director for the city of Hastings. And I'm going to do it in 2 words: wellhead protection.
Andy Kale, I supervise our field services section of the drinking water program. Here in the, first of the early meetings haven't been around for a little while. I just by default here representing the drinking water, groundwater today, so really no preconceived notions, but here to contribute.
Burdette Peening, first time here. I'm a farmer, a retired farmer. Been to many equip meetings, Lower Platte South meetings. Just wanting to hear what you all have to say.
I'm Tara Anderson. I'm the Surface Water Quality Standards Coordinator for NDE. I'm so here to listen.
Brian Chapman, Lower Platte, North NRD. Solution. We need a solution.
Charlie Stolto, Dean and Director of Nebraska Extension. Been here 18 months. And Rourke's probably been following, I'm not sure. Flag Day 2 days ago, I finished up with my visiting our 83rd county office. We have 83 offices across the state. Trained as a veterinarian. Lived here 30 years ago. As the assistant state epidemiologist for the Nebraska Department of Health. I was with the Centers for Disease Control for 2 years. I'm trained as an epidemiologist. Been doing water analytics, primarily nitrates, since 1990. In one word, is policy. Because policy drives the decisions that are made throughout the entire.
Annette Sundbeck, General Manager of the Melissa Clark, NRD Party.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we hit on several of the single word items, and all of them have hurdles. And I think identifying mechanisms to get past those hurdles and facilitate farmers being able to do what they need to do and address concerns. There's a lot of hurdles and stuff that policy hurdles. Figuring out what they are and taking care of them. I'm Rebecca Camp. I'm the Bow Creek Watershed Coordinator for the Lewis and Clark NRD. I guess I don't know. I guess my one word that I always carry with me is soil health. And probably all of the one words that we've heard come back to that, in my opinion, so.
Hi, my name is Lisa Lauber. I'm the Brazil Groundwater Management Area Project Coordinator. I'm out of the Lower Alcohol County. I'm here to learn, observe, and put my 2 cents worth in.
Online, Julie, do you want to start us off? Or Laura, do you want to start us off with an introduction?
Yeah, I can start. My name is Laura Negengast. I am a source water protection extension educator out of UNL, DEE, Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy, and then also UNMC. Also, I apologize for not being able to be there in person today, but it's nice to see you all. So this is definitely a learning moment for me. This will be a learning meeting about what's all going on in the state of Nebraska, what all these entities are up to. and where my place can be within it. I would say if I had to sum it up in 2 words, it's similar to what Ryan said. I would say collaborative solutions, figuring out what we all do and how we can work together and what our parts are in solving these solutions and these problems, finding these solutions and solving some of these problems.
Craig, do you want to go next?
Hi, my name's Craig Romery. I'm with the Nebraska Department of Agriculture's pesticide program, and I work in water quality, work with NRDs, and administer the buffer strip program here through the department. And I don't know that I could add any more than what has been said previously.
Scott Sabatka?
You're stuck with me today. Tyler Weisson, the assistant manager, Lower Big Blue NRD. So
Tricky.
yeah.
Mike Sushek?
Yeah, Mike Sochek, with the Lower Platte South NRD, he's going to be general manager here. I signed on a little late, so I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be giving you updates on or what words I'm supposed to be pulling out of the air, but I'll just go along with what everyone else was saying.
Cale Peterson.
Hey, yeah. I'm Cole Peterson. I'm with Nebraska Farm Bureau Federation, and I am environmental and regulatory affairs. This is my first of these meetings, so I'm mostly here today to be a sponge and absorb all the wisdom.
And Julie?
Hi, I apologize. I was on the phone before when you called on me. I'm the grant coordinator at the Lower Elkhorn NRD, and I'm here to learn more as well.
All right, well, thank you all for those introductions. Did I miss anyone online? Looks like we got everyone. So, you know, I have to say that this is still one of the largest subcommittees that I've ever been a part of. I'm impressed with the fact that we keep broadening the breadth and the depth of the people attending. And I think it speaks volumes to the interests of all parties in Nebraska in water quality. So kudos to everyone who's in this room and anyone who we work with that might be contributing, and we might be contributing on their behalf. So with that, we're gonna jump into Brad, actions needed, deadlines, all the good stuff.
Well, not all the good stuff.
Don't have time for all that, Brad?
No, I think we all want a weekend. No, I just wanted to touch on a couple things. Like I said, you know, there's some programmatic things that we can do. You know, we're voluntary incentive based. We're in charge, NRCS, of the Farm Bill programs, and there's some funding. There's some policy requirements that we set aside some funds, you know, for source water and resource concerns. So a couple things coming up.
They're not clicking through, bro.
No, it's
Oh, well, we're not plugged in. That might help. Here, I'll advance you. Go ahead. I'll just grab the USB.
okay. So we talked about NWQI, our priority areas, and we got started. You know, back in December, I guess, talking about, you know, some deadlines every year. Every state's got an opportunity to submit projects and that has to meet certain criteria. We won't get into all of that here today. But, you know, there has to be an impaired water, either surface or groundwater, got to be in 319. There's got to be on an impaired waters list, those kinds of things. and we've had our existing watersheds. So we now have our marching orders, for this year. And the good news is, I guess, that we have until July 28th to submit any changes we're gonna make to our watersheds. And just very briefly, to qualify as an NWQI or a source water protection area, source water protection being groundwater part of NWQI and other NWQIs is surface water. So each one of these projects have to have a multi-year implementation plan documenting the projected activity and funding needs for the project timeframe. So, NWQI is a partnership between EPA and USDA at the national level. And the initial agreement for NWQI, the project, the initial agreement went through 2023. And so all of our plans that we had, our implementation plan, they all went through 2023. So that in itself, we knew that we were gonna have to update those plans and project them forward. So that's part of the task. Fred and Tom, they've been working, with the NRDs and getting great feedback, a lot of good work on that. So part of this is figuring out what needs to be in that implementation plan. They don't need to be new plans. A lot of it is just what we're gonna carry forward with that, but there has to be, we have to update the time frames. So what we're doing now is if we continue with those projects, we're now looking at 24 to 28, basically. So that is, that's the implementation plans. But if we don't have all of that in place, we still need to put that assessment together and do work on that. We can go forward with a planning phase project. Now, the planning phase just gives us time to, get the assessment completed, get the plan completed, get the data gathered, those kind of things. And there is no FA, which comes with the planning phase, but we are able to get some TA, some technical assistance funds. And those funds would either be used by NRCS staff, or we could write an agreement to give that to the NRD, or if that's what we want to do. So things we'll have to consider there.
Brad, how soon do those agreements have to be done? What's the timeline on those?
Well, for a planning phase,
Yeah.
so there's no deadline.
Oh,
We can have a planning phase and continue several years if that's what it takes. But until we get all the other assessment completed and everything, it will probably stay in a planning phase until we move it to implementation phase. So things we have to do, we have to evaluate the status of the existing watersheds, and we've been working on that. You all have for several months now. We have to update the implementation plans if needed. If we have new data, or we want to, include different criteria and that kind of stuff. So that's on the existing. We can move them forward as implementation. We can request new watersheds. And we've already had the discussion, we're gonna look at Bow Creek as a new watershed this year. We could request to withdraw current watersheds if we've just done everything we can, we've met our objectives, those kind of things, we can withdraw. And that's the NWQI part. That also holds true with the office. So, same thing, both cases there. And then we have to look at the core practices and the supporting practices. That can be updated every year with, if we have new practices we want to bring in to utilize, we can do that. And I mentioned we need to update all the plans, to take them from 24 through 2028. So I just threw these slides back in. So these are the current watershed, Brazil, Wahoo Creek, Turkey, Big Sandy. Wahoo Creek is currently in the planning phase. I think we're gonna be looking to move that, back to implementation. I need to get a slide that shows Bull Creek and get that on the list too, so. But just a quick review there. I thought, just review again the funding that we get. You know, we get allocated funds for each one of these projects. It's kind of a two-phase process to get funds. The really important part is the budget that we set up and the estimates. And so we'll be going through a process in each one of these to identify the actual practices. We'll try to identify the number of contracts we're going to write. And that all gets back to the interest within these watersheds. That's a key component, is we have to demonstrate that there's producer interest in each one of these project areas. And so, so we will have that estimate in the plan. That'll be looked at as far as what we think we need per project in a certain year. And then there's a resource assessment, which the states go through each year to request funds, which is sometimes it's a little bit more than what's in the plan, sometimes it's a little bit less. So last year, we started out with 1.2 million for all three active projects. And you can see there kind of where we ended up as far as applications and what got obligated. So all of the funds that we received got obligated. As you know, this is review for most of you, but the application cutoff date, that's part of what we need to decide is when we're gonna have that cutoff date. And then through EQIP and NWQI, if we don't get the applications that we need to utilize the funding, then we can have an additional cutoff date. And we did that this year. And so a lot of good work on the field from all of you. We got extra applications and actually more than we could fund. So we just got notified just in the last day that so we have a funds assessment period where we can go in every state and request additional funds for unfunded application, high priority applications. So we did request additional funds based on the applications, unfunded applications in each one of our NWQI projects. And we got everything. First time that's ever happened. And so Connor, I think it was 660,000.
Yep. Yeah, additional.
So that's additional funds. I think Connor, you got the word out to the DCs yesterday to go ahead and get busy. Now we finished the assessment, we finished the planning, get the contract written and bill. So that's great news. So fingers crossed, we don't have feature backing. It's, we want to utilize all of those funds. The NWQI, if we don't use them here in the state, they have to be returned back to headquarters. So anyway, so that's kind of a part of the other part of the plan, the outreach plan. So having that producer interest is key. And all ties into the application. On the source water protection side, we got our marching orders on that as well. Now, in the past years, I think I've indicated to this committee that we'd have until September 30th to get our source water protection areas revised. If we want to, we can look at our priority areas, make changes, we can expand them, do different things. All of that now, this year has to be done by August 25th instead of September 30th, so kind of move that timeline up. So just a little bit of background on that. The priority areas within the state can't exceed 20% of the total land area of the state. And there's some criteria on how you select the source water protection areas. You look at, nutrient sediments, all that stuff, water system violations, different things, the size of the population. There's all of those factors there that we look at, when we're looking at our priority areas, and so we have to look at those. If we're gonna make changes, that we need to resubmit that by August 25th.
Hey, Brent, real quick, size of the population, does that cut both ways? I mean, obviously, you know, high population areas have one set of concerns, but some of these very small towns and other places have another set of concerns. How does that population size actually figure into that?
Yeah, I don't know that it does a lot, Britt might.
He does come.
But no, I don't think that, I mean, there's a criteria set up on the side, but, if there's an issue, there's an issue.
Yeah, I didn't know if, you know, a bigger, population with a bigger tax base would score higher and lower than a smaller one.
I don't think so. If we make it a priority area in the state, we're gonna target it, that's where we're gonna target our funds. Now, there are some things we could do as far as allocations, that kind of stuff. We chose to just set our priority on a statewide basis, and then that, we'll look at the map here in a minute, but, so no, it's not gonna discriminate as far as I can. So, the priority areas, obviously must relate to water quality and quantity, so we sometimes forget about the quantity side of things. But that can be a factor as far as the criteria. And then, we'll look at the practices too, we identify practices which we're gonna make eligible in these priority areas, and then we have some ability to look at the payment rates, for those practices, and there's, we can do that if we want to, have a higher payment rate, for example, in a source water protection area over, say, generally. So the practices, here's what we have currently for the practices. We need to take a look at the practice list. And the practices that we identify need to affect those resource concerns, they need to have some effect on water quality or water quantity. And so within the source water protection, we also have the ability to identify up to 10 practices. Doesn't have to be 10, but up to 10 practices that we can increase the payment rate up to 90%. Under generally equipped, when we calculate a payment rate, the cap generally is 75% of the component costs. And this is all behind the scenes, we don't pay a percentage. It's not a cost share thing, but we are able to increase the payment rates on up to 10 practices. So that's something we need to talk about. The ones we have identified, I have the asterisks there: conservation cover, conservation buffer strips, field border, riparian forest buffer, filter strip, nutrient management, pest management, wetland restoration. So those practices, we pay up to 90%. And it doesn't have to be 90%, it can be up to 90%. So those are all things we need to talk about to make our money go farther, that kind of thing, and target that. So that's something that needs to be done.
That says FY 23, is that would be?
That's what we currently have for FY 23. We will be looking at the practices for FY 24. That's what we have to update by August 27th. So yes, this is what we currently have. So we can look at that, we can make changes or not.
Is it fair to assume those won't change a ton?
I haven't heard a lot of interest in that, but it can. There might be a new practice or something that we can take a look at, so.
Is there a reason irrigation water management is a part of that 90%?
I think we thought that it had a pretty decent payment rate, and it's one of our most popular practices. Part of that is to provide a little more incentive to use that practice. And, I don't think I have that summary report, but, 449 irrigation water management is one of the more popular practices. Most people would use that, but it's something we talk about. Yeah, absolutely.
What about the combination of practices, Brad? In other words, if you check the boxes on 10 of these collectively, is there a benefit involved with that? Or in other words, if you pick on cover crop and you do irrigation water management, you do nutrient management, and you just kind of pick from the list, but you have, say, half a dozen of those in a system piece. Have you given any thought to putting that together as in upping the payment rates as a result of that combination?
Yeah, so we can, set up our ranking tool to give priority point or give extra points if you've got a system approach or whatever, we can do that. To vary the payment rate after we've set them, we can do that. Once we set the payment rate for practice, that's what it is. And all of that has to be done by the end of September, the coming year. All of our cost lists, payment schedules, that all have to be completed at the end of September, then then it's published on the website, and then it's on. So now's the time to be having all those conversations, and, but yeah, we want to have a higher payment rate, that for the practices, all that needs to be discussed here the next month, so.
Correct.
Yeah.
What I'm getting from the producers is they're asking if any of the practice can be extended past the 3-year, especially cover crops, since we know cover crops are really actually the potential to stop the leaching. If it could be extended to the 6-year, or even beyond that, just so that we can get the results we need in the areas.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and the answer is yes. Just this year, there was a policy change on management practices where we can have it 5 years. So we can do a cover crop for 5 years. And, I don't know if this is part of your question, but, once that contract is signed, and so we could have a contract for 10 years. So we don't like to have those long contracts, but we can. Those are some of the things we need to discuss and talk about.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that 5 years was just on cover crops or for any?
No, any management.
Okay. Same up to 10 years. but-
Well, 5 years. We can go up to 5 years on a management practice. The contract can be up to 10.
Oh, okay, okay.
You have to add other practices.
Sure.
In there.
And kind of refresh me on the outcomes part of that contract. What's the accountability as a result of those practices, and what influence does that have over a better leaching or better VADOS or whatever the case may be? What is kind of the follow-up to that, or accountability to it, I guess?
Yeah, so, well, the accountability, the producer, we have practice standards.
Right.
Everything has to be installed according to practice standards. So if they agree to install practice on a cover crop or whatever it is, and they install it to specifications, it's planted at the right time, right mix and all that, then we pay them. And then that's pretty much it. So I mean, it's a voluntary incentive based, there is no, authority for us to go back and after the fact and say, well, this didn't work, or you didn't maintain it, or that. Once the contract is over, it's over. So what we hope is that, by getting that practice out there, it's going to, we're going to be able to measure the results somehow. That's part of our plan, NWQI especially. There needs to be a method that we're going to measure the output. How are we going to do that? How are we going to monitor that kind of stuff? So from that standpoint, hopefully we can get some processes in place to, measure the results. I don't know if I answered your question.
The quality, whether it's source water or NWQI or where we are with I've just asked a lot of questions about the contamination levels. And you've heard me say this before. We rented a piece of ground here recently, irrigated Lincoln County, that in 1974, when that observation well was put in, was 2.6 parts per million, and today it's 16. And it's never looked back. And yet those practices have been paid for against other landowners and other operators. And that's my curiosity. I don't have any way of accounting for how much money's been spent in terms of those voluntary practices, but it's never looked back. So, and maybe somebody around the room, I'm not that familiar with Brazil in terms of the measuring and you know, where it's headed. Is the trend down? Is it flat? Because I assume there's been a substantial amount of change been spent in the Brazil Creek area over the last 4 or 5 years. And to me, the casualty of that will be if those practices aren't maintained, or if there isn't a way to be able to follow that up. What does that mean for the rest of us that are in a place that figuring out, you know, identifying and how do we sustain that kind of effort and funding to make change? So that I like the idea of extending that, but also at some point, there's some responsibility on the landowner and the producer to, you know, we got to do what's right at some point. But that's really my question. And that's why I was curious about if there's a way that we can account for more practices as a plan, as a system inside that. I didn't review that. It'd been nice to see I haven't seen the latest application, I guess, to how that fits, but that may be a possibility. I don't know. But I'm asking everybody in the room as well too, is how do we do that?
Yeah, I'll hit on, then others can. But, you know, on the practices, you know, our management practices, they're 1 year. They're 1 year long. Once we install it, then it's over. The challenge is, you know, and we can query, you know, where the practices were applied, you know, where the cover crops were and those kind of things. And we've got some efforts going, you know, for that. And then hopefully we can connect the dots that it looks like, you know, this set of practices had an effect. Maybe it brought down some nitrate levels or E. coli or whatever it is. So that's kind of the challenge, and we're looking for all ideas how to do that. But make a good point. I don't know if Brazil, if you wanted to.
Well, there's a lot of producers within the Brazil area that have continued practice or pay for the practice. It's not incentivized for them because they don't like the EQIP program, from my discussions with them. And they continue to practice. And the NRDs have their deep soil sampling. They do the soil testing. If we wanted to really take a look at it, and I think the managers of the NRDs are looking at the 10-foot in the Vega zone to see really if we started monitoring that more heavily than we do. We might see the effects. We might see the nitrate going in the opposite direction, contamination going in the opposite direction. But up until we commit, it's sporadic, the testing is. The deep soil samples that the NRDs do for their phasing is a 3 or 4 foot sample, depends on the NRD. So
It's a minimum of 24 inches depending on where you're at.
yeah. So it's there, the records are there. You just need to consolidate them, probably take a look at.
Yeah, so here's our priority areas. You know, we have the wellhead identified as our high priorities in the state, and then we have some medium priority areas or quantity management areas, or medium priority, those crosshatched areas, and phase 2 work on water management areas. So we have high and medium priority areas. That's what we have. This has worked well, I think. You know, we have about 8 million acres identified, which is under 20%. Now's the time, you know, we want to look at the boundaries on these high priority areas. We want to change those. There's some opportunity to do some of that, reprioritize areas. As far as We're required to set aside 10% of our total allocation of EQIP funds for source water protection. So that's roughly 3 million this year. And I think we had to fund every application we had. I think we hit it almost on the mark. So there isn't an abundance. We don't have more applications we can fund. So we still need to do some outreach and in these areas. And then the other thing we're working on is, within these high priority areas, which practices are being applied there. And so we'll try to get some data on that as well. So
I was gonna ask Brad if you had overlays of like the sampling that exists around those areas and also cropping, maybe even, I don't know what GIS opportunities exist, but it'd be interesting to overlay and look at that and even see a time lapse of it from the time that, which way is it growing, which way is it, how that is all working, because within the NRDs I'm in, there's not that many monitoring wells. And that data piece was a big one. I talked to the water center about figuring out how do we, what kind of data do we really need to look at that? So that might, and I don't know if those are opportunities that we can fund or be a part of.
yeah, I mean, we're making some efforts to try to get that done, internally, and, but there might be other resources out there to help us analyze that. What there is. But absolutely, we need to see which practices, where they're going, and then if it's having any effect, so anyway, just mentioned there, that's, where we were with the application, so I guess I misspoke. But Connor, we had 193 applications in source water, and we were only able to approve just a fraction of those, so. So anyway, yeah, so I misspoke there, so we got plenty of applications in source water, so we need more money, or we need more put towards source water there, so.
I mean, do you show where those are at, where those applications are? Yeah.
There is a map. We can't show you for PI purposes.
Oh, sure.
Exactly where it's at, but we do have a map. I can pull that up at some point of the generalized where those applications or where those contracts reside in the last 2-3 fiscal years. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you majority or anything, but I can find that. I'll see it, yes.
So how many applications would you have had in prior years as opposed to the 193 that you show there?
Since source water's inception, which was 2020.
Oh, it's only a couple of years.
Yeah, it's always been a matter of we've got more applications than we can approve. Now our target is 10% of our EQIP general fund, so that around that 2.4 million you see there, but we've always, chipped in a little bit more than that based on demand and whatnot.
Do you have a general idea of what type of applications are approved, what practices break out?
Well, the high priority ones are, of course, things like nutrient management, more management type practices, but I can tell you, I mean, it's a lot of sprinkler systems, irrigation water management that a lot of these funds are going towards, just because, we approved the high priority areas and the more management practices, but it was a majority, I think, sprinkler systems that are being done through these funds. Yeah,
So that's a conversion from surface water to groundwater?
correct. Yep.
No.
Or conversion.
From gravity to.
Gravity irrigated, sorry.
Yeah, both.
Or pivot.
That's the same. Yeah, we're talking the same thing. Surface water irrigated, gravity irrigated to here. Yep. Overhead, mechanical, whatever, yeah.
So I gotta move on, but, anyway, just wanted to.
So how is that in relationship to source water protection to simply convert? I mean, what's the concept behind that, I guess? I'm asking the TA guys, Britt.
Well, I'm not following your question.
What's
Yeah,
the,
Quantity is what drives the quality down, what drives the nutrients down, so try to retime that and not drive the nutrients down
from the
from the rhythm zone.
from the surface water?
So from gravity irrigation.
Right.
Putting on way more than the crop can take up, so you're just pushing those nutrients down into the profile.
Especially on the upper end of the field.
Well, I don't disagree with it. It just intrigues me that that's a significant portion that it wouldn't have. So nutrient management is part of that application.
Yeah, like I was saying, the high priority, more bang for our buck would be, more of these applications going towards nutrient manager 590, but we fund the applications we get with the applications that are signing up for that, but then the remaining funds, that's what's remaining. So that's what we're putting those funds towards, more so this sprinkler irrigation.
And that's more to my point, is kind of the system piece of it. It isn't just any one particular one, but a combination of any of those, cover crop, nutrient management, any of those. But if that's figuring out what makes the leveraging the funds, and I assume that that's where it comes out of. How does that work then, Brad? You guys do that internally then? The process of where those priority projects lie then? That only comes from you guys, from the staff?
Well, so we've got the priority areas, and to be eligible, the application has to be at least half the acres have to be within one of those priority areas. And maybe.
Oh, okay. So that isn't just in general, that is specifically to those areas that you have identified.
That's where those funds are targeted.
So there isn't really any effort outside of those priority areas to even begin to look at that at this point.
There are other funding avenues, other ranking pools.
Okay.
But source water protection is
those
set aside funds targeted towards those high priority wellhead protection areas, groundwater and quantity management areas.
So are the applications that aren't able to be funded through source water, do they go into the general?
Yeah, they get ranked in the general pools as well, like your Lower Elkhorn, Lewis and Clark, NRD, local general funds, as well as other, state fund pools, beginning farmer rancher, those set aside ones as well. So there's opportunity elsewhere to get those applications funded.
There may be adjustments, though, if it was a 90% practice under source water, they would be at the general rate.
They would be. That's kind of the advantage of getting picked up in source water if you're in those areas is. Well, I take that back. Those 90%, those 10 practices, that is still a 90% rate outside of the source water protection areas. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
A quick question. So if a farmer submits an application and they're not approved for something that is good with them, does that application then roll over to the next year and get resubmitted automatically, or do they have to resubmit?
We send a letter, they have the opportunity to just cancel their application or defer it into the next fiscal year. Yep. And a lot of times that it's a deferral, will be considered next year, and we'll reevaluate, the field officer will reevaluate the applications and then re-rank it to the next fiscal year for consideration.
Is there any secondary conversations through I'll pick on extension. Is there any way that that's connected through in other words, if that isn't funded, but they have a challenge and they're asking for some technical assistance, is there any way that they make those connections, say with the university or anybody else? Or does it just, it's just not funded and this is where it lies? Till next year. Is there any communication with anybody that has that kind of conversation?
So I would say I know of a couple instances where we have a really good working relationship in our county office with our extension educator. But I think it's sporadic based upon that relationship that's been built.
That makes sense. That's why I asked the question, is if there's a way to connect those producers to a next level or landowners. It's just a thought. I don't know if there is a process or a way that it can, that continues on instead of just waiting for a next round of funding.
Yeah, ideally, like what Katie said, depending on the county you're in, there's that level of communication between your partners that, you don't get picked up for funding through re-equip or something, there's knowledge between the two offices, extension and NRCS of available funding elsewhere potentially or whatnot, so.
Don't the offices though have some knowledge of whether somebody's gonna get funded based on what they're signing up for? I mean, they can always add something that would boost their points.
Yeah, yep, you know, each NRD has their own local screen or prioritization, you know. So they kind of have a general idea of, you know, what's a high, what's a medium, what's a low, if they have those different category prioritizations. They kind of have an idea of what's gonna get funded. And then through the ranking questions and whatnot, one could, you know, generally the more practices you're tacking on or willing to do, more management practices, the higher you're gonna rank out. So, you know, we're not supposed to coach anybody on that or, you know, things like that, but yeah.
Although if you've, from experience, if you have a failed application, they'll come back and they'll help you find and identify other areas. A lot of them are. All right, so that was really good questioning. I'm hoping that gave everyone a good understanding of those programs. Kind of transitioning here, we're gonna keep with the NWQI theme where we started and go, and Fred's gonna give us updates on the NWQI project proposals that we discussed at the last meeting.
Okay. Right, I just wanted to remind again, like what Brad said, that our deadline to get our NWQI plans to national is July 28th. And I've been talking with the NRDs and with the partners of the different NWQIs. I've put a target date of July 17th on there. So we can have some time to review before they are submitted. I'm just gonna go through the different NWQIs and just give you a brief update of where we're at. Start with Brazil there. I talked with, I think Lisa was last Thursday or Friday. We're planning to meet there this afternoon after our meeting to discuss that the documents that we need to be submitting and also the location of the NWQI. And then also be reviewing some of the practices. I sent an email out to the different, to the 4 NRD managers and also the district conservationists and asked them, you know, these are the practices that you used last time we redid this. Are you want to keep them? Anything else you want to change? And so I'll send that out there. Phase wise, that we're in for this project for the Brazil, we're in the implementation stage of it. So that means that we'll be requesting funds for fiscal year 24 through that 28 timeframe. The next one on the list is the Big Sandy Creek, or there by the Hebron area. So we've had a few different emails out to their NRDs, and I called them yesterday to try to get a hold of Scott. That we've not had a great success of that, and so I'm gonna try to give them another call here this afternoon in hopes to set up a meeting there with them. What I have found has been helpful if we can at least have like one meeting in person. I know that we did that there with Ryan there from Wahoo, was very beneficial, and then we went off to their, then we had some Zoom meetings to follow up with. And so that's been our attack, is trying to meet at least once in person with the partners. Alberts came down there with us there, and then Renee, myself, and then the NRD's managers. And so like I say, that is also the their phase of the project is also it would be in the implementation stage. So that's what we'll be looking at. Wahoo, they're correct there. Met with Brian and with Albert and several different partners about a month ago in person. Since then, I believe that we've had 2-3 meetings with Brian. And after that, just last week that we went over the different documents that we need to be sent to national, divided up the tasks to be done by each partner, also reviewed the different practice lists. And we set up what we want to be targeted for that NWQA area for the 4 and also the supporting practices. Again, we're planning to meet then on June 26th to check with the progress and see how we're coming with it. That phase of the project is also going to be in the implementation stage. The Bow Creek project there, I called it NIT. I think I called you on Thursday or Friday last week too. We're also planning to meet here this afternoon just to discuss that the boundary area and to get more information. And also maybe I'm planning to send you home a list of practices you think you might be interested in, looking forward to. So we're going to do some gathering information here after our meeting today. And then with the Turkey Creek area, met with the Lower Big Blue NRD and our partners just yesterday. We visited about what they felt like has been successful with their project so far and what they wanted to do move forward. Again, we reviewed the different documents that we sent to national and assigned the different tasks of those documents. We went through and reviewed the different core and supporting practices that will be offered for the new NWQI agreement. And again, that we're planning to meet on June 26th in the afternoon to review progress and the tasks assigned.
How many acres are involved roughly in each one of those projects currently? Just a ballpark.
I'm not sure on that one. That's a good question. We can get back with you.
Average hub 12 is about 25,000 acres. Typical project is about 3 hubs. 75,000 acres.
Is typically what it is, Albert. So Brazil is in that range or more?
84,000
Is 384?
acres.
And,
It's got 12.
and so what kind of budget will you have this year for that?
Sure, yeah.
Not for sure. What'd you have last year?
800,000.
800. Yes, that was the number.
Yep.
That was the number that was across there.
But we're still, right now, we're sitting at just about 1.182, I believe. With all of 5 have not been funded.
But not all of the HUC 12s are irrigated or farmed, are they, Albert? I mean, are they, what are they, 50%? Farm ground, I mean, that you would actually have, or do you have some grazing and stuff involved in that too? Or is that strictly the nutrient and irrigation and?
No, all the projects that we've got are pretty much mixed.
They are.
There's some grazing, small feedlots. And it's a mix of dry land and irrigated.
And so it is.
Brazil, the 300 and some thousand acres, but it's not the whole footprint that's eligible. It's the wellhead protection areas within that. So the eligible acres are a lot smaller.
For the 319. In the QI is all of it, and the equip covers all of the 319. So a lot of Knox County has brush management, practices. Yeah. The 319 only covers 2 more than 202, and that's how it's been tracked. So that's why I'm beginning the tracking process of across the 384,000.
So, and so my questions are, I guess I'm trying to get to the point is what the investment that we put in the water quality side, I guess. Maybe that's a simpler question to ask.
Concentrate on wellhead protection areas, and that's what we have tracked so far. Most of the practices have been crop rotation, no-till crop rotation, cover crops, irrigation water management, and nutrient management. So those are the priority for the wellhead protection areas through the section 319 funding. But that doesn't necessarily mean that incorporates everything that the equip covers throughout the NWQI.
Your whole area though is open to NWQI, the whole Brazil area,
Yes,
not just 20% like everywhere else?
it was 2020 that the NWQI expanded. It was just the 5 hucks, and it went to, in 2020, it went to 12 hucks.
I thought it switched from hucks to wellhead protection areas. I could be wrong. That's what I was told.
I was wrong too.
It's based on a township, and it aligns perfectly with the Brazil management plan.
Can I ask a question about the wellhead protection areas? Okay, and maybe you don't know this, but within those wellhead protection areas, I'm assuming that most of them were established because there was a 20-year travel time for those communities. And a 50. Okay.
20. Yep.
Has any of those communities considered where the recharge is coming from? that may be outside of that 20 or 50-year travel. So is there work being done? Because if you're gonna put management areas in there, you really need to be looking at the recharge area, not just within the well protection, though we need to do as well. So.
Right, there were more protection, as in tier 3, that's, rooms like all.
It explained tier 3.
Tier 3 is anything outside of tier 1, tier 2, and it's got 1,000-foot buffer zone. And I think that's the way that.
We do have AEM surveys in the Brazil area that would be helpful in identifying those sensitive areas for recharge. We have not approached that yet. We've discussed it pretty heavily for the Creighton area. And it's something I think we talked about. We're just updating our 319 plan, and that's part of that discussion.
We do have the inquiries already in place, but we haven't.
But I mean, investigation further for those recharge areas, etc. We have not really, we started the discussion.
Yeah, it seems to me that if we look at recharge, that might allow you to better focus those dollars to get a bigger bang for the buck.
Yeah.
We're just now starting with that.
So I think what Marty's getting to is the wellhead protection modeling that historically has been done just shows where the water is coming from in the aquifer and doesn't show where the actual
Recharge.
Recharge.
One of the areas that where you look at data, and that's one thing that's dear to my heart is understanding recharge. And that's not well understood in places in our.
I was gonna say, Marty, when you understand recharge, you come and talk to me and then we'll both know.
Yeah, I know, but
It's a push.
yeah, and it's just like, well, it's too big to look at, but
No,
seriously,
it's
we
not.
need to look at it.
But it takes a lot of time.
Issue. Yeah. So we're getting to that point. We don't, I mean, we've done it. I mean, I think we have.
We're identifying some challenges that I think is imperative that the room recognizes, especially those that sit outside like I do outside of the municipal piece. Because my question is ultimately, what is a sample size gonna look like that we can start to make some determinations? And one of the things that I'm gonna take on myself, I know, and it really mirrors the Know Your Well project that many of you have been a part of. Essentially, I requested 50 well tests, and I'm gonna mirror that with when the NRD samples the same week that they do it. They've gone through and we've trained or talked to them about their sampling regimen, and we're gonna sample all our wells at the same time as they do and create a data set. And so to me, that might be a question or a process to go through is what kind of data is important. In the NRDs that I'm in, there's not that many concentrated monitoring wells. They're scattered all over. Until, that's why I asked the question about around source water and then NWQI is what is that sample set that is around them, whether it's recharge or whether it's the what you call it, transmissivity, hydrologically connected part. How does that play into those pieces? Because I sit on one of these actually sits on the border of the Republican and the Twin Platte, and yet we're 70 miles from both of them, or well, 55 and 60, but under the 50-20 rule, I mean, we are connected to one or the other as a result of that recharge. So I'm just trying to get my arms around is what just makes common sense that a landowner producer can have a level of comfort with and some willingness to participate in something like that without with a PI that allows you to have the integrity or the willingness to participate in it without being punitive at this point. But it appears to me that the data is insufficient in a broader sense to help identify even what's going on outside of these areas. So it's just a thought. And I know the NRDs are talking about this all the time and live that world. And yet I'm just questioning, how do we tackle this monster in a process that makes sense to us as a landowner producer?
I think with your focus on the data there and the directive towards source water protection that really got us moving along, you transitioned us perfectly to Brett. Thought there was something better coming here. But I think, I've added that for, our second half discussion. I think there's a lot of these questions that are being posed today that are much more than we're going to answer in a 5, 10, or 5-hour discussions. So I think it's a good conversation to have. And so with that, Britt, if we'll transition to you, and you've got a couple things, source water protection, to continue us on this subject.
Yeah, so we've got some new faces, so I'm gonna just briefly recap source water protection and what we've done to date. So, Brad showed some slides there, just to recap. So 2018 Farm Bill is what started the source water protection and the mandate that a minimum of 10% of our Farm Bill program funding goes towards source water protection. Our primary program we work with on that is, you hear the term EQIP. It's Environmental Quality Incentive Program. That's our main cost share program to work with producers on providing cost share to install conservation practices like cover crops, irrigation, water management, et cetera. So we showed the slide of the priority areas. We had a working group that kind of helped us do that. There's over 500 wellhead areas in the state. So those were given high priority. Obviously, the source water protection and run as much of that to go right to those wellhead areas that help the communities. Then we had kind of a fallback with our medium priorities. If we didn't use all of our money in the high priority areas, then we selected some medium priority areas where we'd still be doing good, but not as much good directly on source water protection. Those are the phase 2 and phase 3 nitrate areas that the NRDs manage, and that's also, there's a larger water quantity management area out in the Panhandle, south of Chadron in there, and then there's some smaller ones around the state, because it is quantity as well as quality, providing that kind of reassurance or sustainability for source water protection that communities will have their sources of drinking water. So I'll cut to the chase here. As I mentioned at the very first meeting, we have always used our $2+ million. However, as Brad just showed on a slide just earlier, out of 193 applications, 24 were in the wellhead areas. All right, 24. So we fund all of those because we fund all the high priorities before you even look at the mediums. And then we funded 40 some of the mediums in the medium priority to use our $2+ million. Again, the medium priorities are still doing good. They're still reducing nitrates, but we're only using, to use FY23 as an example, we're only using 1/3 of our source water protection directly in the wellheads. All right, so if we really want to maximize our $2+ million to help communities in the wellheads, we've talked about we may need a little more boots on the ground to directly work with landowners in those wellhead areas, providing direct outreach and technical assistance to kind of connect them up. You're farming in a wellhead, they may not even know that. And then what practices would benefit, your neighbors here, with protecting this wellhead area. And kind of coincidentally, Dick Herman mentioned in the Lower Platte South, they were in the process, and I believe you're completed the process, they're still in the process of hiring a drinking water specialist in the Lower Platte South NRD with the focus of doing that very thing, 25, 30 wellheads, I think, in the Lower Platte South.
Interviews start next week.
There you go. So it was very simple to take a look at a good idea that's already happening here and talk about maybe we should expand that idea across the state. Because we have this need to better utilize our money. We can send out all the promotional material if possible, but it just really takes that boots on the ground to really reach people and tell them what our programs can do and so forth.
Brent, of the 500 that you stated there, were all 193 of those part of that 500 then?
No.
They weren't?
Nope, 24.
No. I mean, in terms of where they exist though, in the application, you said there's 500 wellheads.
500 some wellheads.
Are the 193 part of that 500?
No. 24.
So
Only
where the rest of them at?
in those phase 2 and phase 3 nitrate areas that the NRDs are managing. You got that, you got that?
Oh, right. Okay, so that's just the yellow.
Well, yeah, the yellow. So you see where all these contracts are?
Yep.
A lot of those are in those phase 2 and phase 3 areas. They're not directly intersecting the wellhead area. If we only limited our applications to wellhead areas,
Right.
we wouldn't use our 2 million.
Yeah, you wouldn't do it.
No.
Gotcha.
So that's where we talked about to better utilize our money, because not only is it in this farm bill, but I can't imagine that it won't be something that's politically popular to keep in there. So I think we're working with 10% of our EQIP going forward, would be my guess. So how do we best utilize that? And it seems like boots on the ground is what we need. So in our last meeting, we decided to form a work group outside of this committee to help think through this idea of taking this idea of one person and expanding it to however many is needed to effectively do this. Now, Tatiana, who was with the NDEE, she was working with me this early on. She developed a spreadsheet, Albert shared with me here just recently again. And what she had done is she had intersected the wellhead areas with land uses. And so, you know, everything from developed to deciduous forests to cropland, all of that. And so she's got that by NRD on tabs on the spreadsheet. And so I kind of just quickly summed up the cropland, because that's really, I think, what we're working on. Cropland things that need a lot, at least on the nitrate side. And there's roughly 3.3 million acres of cropland in all of those wellhead areas.
In the yellow?
Nope.
Oh, all the little squares.
3.3 million acres of cropland are in those wellhead areas.
Just in those squares.
Yeah. And now, I think we need this work group to look at, maybe we can classify these wellheads. I mean, not all of them probably are at risk. So for example, if you had a wellhead area that was 2 parts per million nitrates and 80% of it's grass, it may not be quite the priority to something that's 6, 8, 10 part per million and 80% cropland, you know, that sort of thing. And we can figure out what's the right way of handling this now.
Your cropland means row crop?
I assume so. Did you have a different idea there?
I just wondered if pasture was included in that.
Oh, I wouldn't think pasture would be, but I'm not sure. Who
Pretty sure she used now the statistics, and so she had it separated.
Line herbaceous, I think means pasture.
actually, she's got a category of hay/pasture, so I'm guessing that's in a different category. It's pure cropland, what she's got here.
Did she break out dry and irrigated then, Brett?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It just says cultivated crops, so. So I thought, well, I haven't moved forward on it yet, but maybe it's a good thing I didn't, because I think it's good to regroup with this group here. And number one, I want to achieve 2 things. One, make sure that we aren't overlooking somebody that should be on this work group to evaluate this. So folks, so far, and add in here, Katie, if I missed somebody, but Marty with the city of Hastings said he's interested. Jennifer with NARD, Annette with Lewis and Clark, and Tim Mundorf, who is with Central Valley Ag. He is not here today, but he would represent agribusiness. I think that's great. My question to you today is, who's missing from that group that really ought to be around the table? And I agree to kind of lead the group. I don't know, I would only think it'd take a couple of meetings to get this kind of put together with kind of a thought process. And where I see it going is maybe an agreement that NRCS, maybe some NRDs, maybe communities or whatever, NDEE would contribute to. You know, after we kind of figure out where the wellhead areas are that need the most outreach and people can see, well, that's in my neck of the woods, maybe I need to contribute or whatever. That we develop some agreements, some way of partners putting in money and then decide who would lead that, hire people, etc. So it's just thinking through that whole process, what we would do if we did it kind of like in a collective across the state manner. So who's missing from that list that we should be sure, and maybe we need to reach out to and say, hey, we're putting together this work group, you want to be a part of it.
You need a geologist.
You need a geologist?
Geologist. One in the room.
Is he hiding?
Yeah, but you need to be on that, it's your model.
And you and
I'm not on enough committees.
I know
so,
you're
yeah.
Katie, you be representing UNL, is that?
I think we
That
can
work
do
for you,
that.
Katie?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
gonna
might
mention-
look around and see if we have some other. Get another viewpoint in there.
Was there someone online? Is that maybe
Yeah.
Lauren?
Laura, yeah. Yeah, as a source water protection extension educator, I have a statewide role, so I can't be, everywhere doing outreach county by county or area by area, but yeah, helping coordinate some of those efforts. I would like to be involved.
I think Laurel's background would help.
Yeah.
Really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
The more you like to help people what to do, correct?
So as Katie would say in 2 words, your interviews for your person, what's kind of the next step within the NRD? I mean, what's your thought process within the NRD then?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure where you're going.
What are you looking at? You're gonna sample differently or sample more intensely? I mean, what?
No, this person will be involved in, helping guide our sampling going forward. But the real emphasis of this person is gonna be sale. It's gonna be working with farmers, with landowners, with communities, try and get as many practices on the ground as is possible in as short a period as possible, and then for the longest time possible. So it's gonna be, again, it's gonna be selling our cost share programs. It's gonna be working with NRCS on equip, anything else that is available to get as much ground with BMPs implemented as is possible. And again, since our district's a little bit different than many districts, we've got a lot of our wetland protection areas that certainly aren't irrigated. And many of them are very much mixed between crop ground, pasture, and suburban development. So this person's gonna have to be a jack of all trades. They're not only gonna have to know the ag end of things, but they're also gonna have to know how to work with acreage owners, individual well owners, small communities. So, yeah, and gets back to that one word, Rorick sales. You're gonna have to sell people on the idea that it's not too hard to get people to believe that groundwater quality is important. It's a lot harder to get them to say, okay, what can I do to affect that? And I can do something to affect. That's the key.
Do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I have to put my farmer hat back on and I'm just adding up without the livestock wells. We have 7 private wells on our farm for our houses, our help, and woe was me, but we have never sampled them. Not ever sampled them until we got the report back on our irrigation wells of the increase in nitrates. And the confidence I had in what we've been doing historically is that we were doing the right thing. And we deep sample and do all that stuff. And we have an accountability in our own operation. But in terms of that's why I'm asking about where do we sample? How do we sample? I'm really, that's where I'm pushing you all is what kind of intensity, what are we all gonna gather around? Because when I asked Dan Snow from the Water Center about the Vado Zone, he says there's 2 ways to accomplish that. You quit irrigating and you quit applying nutrients. And I'm going, that's not possible. That isn't even, that I don't even want to, I'm not throwing Dan under the bus here. I'm literally, that was a wake up call to me. But in turn, as one of the largest corn producing states and also the largest irrigated state in the nation, holy smokes, that isn't something I wanted to talk about.
Great bit of theological differences.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And there's I talked to a farmer that he had the same problem, his nitrates went up and he discovered that he has a shale river running underneath his property. And where the contamination was coming from, wasn't anywhere on his property at all.
I'm gonna even go more basic than that, is I have participated with the European Union now for 4 years on their soil health initiative. I'm a part of bringing bee crop biomakers here and working with Lance Gunderson at Pleasanton. Lance has really gone down this whole regenerative soil health piece, and we've been working with John Deere very closely on a 4-year project on our own operation. But the conventional wisdom under a soil test to a PLFA to now the Haney test and the extraction methods and looking at really the nutrient, that total nutrient analysis. That's where I'm headed with these practices, is how do we start to think differently about what we've conventionally done? And how do we, because to me, I belong in the source water protection. If my drinking wells are contaminated, I'm now all at once, I'm a party at 4, but it's a pretty important party on source water or an NWQI.
I just make a sampling comment. I mean, on the eastern end of the state, we know what the problems are. So we're sampling now to maybe refine the specific boundary where we would do management actions. And we're potentially sampling to show progress or not progress with some of the activities that we're doing. But we know we have a problem. We're not out there sampling to prove or disprove that we have a problem. So, and in some cases, I would say that we are sampling to maybe appease people because they don't want to go into management actions, and they're, well, let's sample it more instead of actually do something. So there is that out there.
Well, the commonality of that, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, because I understand the layers of management within the NRDs as an NRD board member for some time. And yet that isn't where I reside anymore. And I know you guys are on that. I'm just thinking it from a common sense idea from a producer landowner side, just what makes sense. I'm grid sampling. I'm spending a lot of money to grid sample to manage my nutrients. Why hadn't I given thought to the whole water piece? But I'm a trends guy. I mean, you look at your nitrates, your carryovers, and are we trending higher or are we trending lower? We don't want to spend a dime more, and obviously don't want to carry over any more than what is totally necessary for an economic return. So I'm going to go back to the sales part. How do we message that out and support it with practices in a combination of a system or through support? Charlie's hiding behind Marty over there, but Charlie's been there, and we've talked about it some, is how do we connect extension? That's why I asked about what that next layer was, or if there's a potential. So I think it fits right into what you're doing.
Back in here, and I'll finish up with 2 quick questions. So I think one more person that needs to be on here is somebody from NDEE, because I need to know what data is possible in connection with these wellhead areas. Is there somebody that's designated that followed up after Tatiana, or what's the status there?
I think the position was advertised, I think it's closed. Dave Misbach, I think he's gonna be looking at applications next week and setting up interviews.
And is there somebody now that, if we got something going this summer that could sit in on this or something?
Dave ran this, I'll go back for it.
Okay.
Johnson and see what the thoughts are.
Yeah, just if you
Or if
would.
anybody agrees, we'll start Dave in it.
Myself, or-
So all Dave's friends agree, right?
So I think that'd be good. And then the final thing, and it's along this lines of data. What data do we need to know about the wellhead areas that would help us prioritize where these people are needed the most? So an obvious thing could be, categorize the wellhead areas based on the nitrate levels of the drinking water, if that's possible. We do have somewhere that Tatiana used some information to intersect these wellheads with the cropland. What would be interesting to me is if we could classify the wellheads based on, these are less than half cropland or whatever category, you know what I mean? Just, so in other words, we could quickly go to, here's the ones that have the hottest nitrates and here's the ones that have the most cropland. And so we'll probably make the most impact quickest if we focus our efforts there. Not to say that we shouldn't have them everywhere, but I'm just thinking through what data would this committee want in order to help make some of these kind of decisions. You had your hand up.
Clearinghouse.nebraska.gov. Clearinghouse,
It's there.
clearinghouse.nebraska.gov.
Are all those wellhead areas identified in?
The wellhead areas are not, I don't think they're loaded in the database yet, but all the data's there. So you can log in and you can pull all the public water supply data, so all, you know, the data.
But that was handy in some
These
format,
requires-
we could classify the 500
Really
well.
good at that is Dave.
What's that?
Dave is really good at getting that.
Yeah. All right, I'm getting the message.
Never wait for Dave to use his colored pencils.
Yeah.
Anything else before, because I want to make sure we're well organized when we do meet with this group, that we have the right people and the right information to kind of look at this stuff. Anything else that hasn't been identified that we need to prepare for?
Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about existing water quality, and obviously that is a critical factor. But I think looking at the big picture and going forward, we also want to factor in vulnerability. In some cases, you may have some wellhead protection areas that right now have fairly low nitrate, but if it's sandy soil and 5 foot of water, you know, that's a problem waiting to happen. So I think we do need to factor in that.
So on that same website, there's 3 different ways of doing that, that all have a statewide coverage. There's a KSAT layer, which is hydraulic conductivity.
Yeah.
And it's from the soils data, so I don't know how deep it goes, but it would give you some indication of how fast water travels in that upper soil layer. There's a depth to groundwater. There's another one. There's that, EPA. What's that old model that EPA has? Drastic model.
Yeah.
Well, at the scale, Dick, at the scale that we're looking. And then there's Craig Romery, Department of Ag, came up with a little bit better version, and that's included in there too.
I was gonna say, if those Department of Ag pesticide vulnerability
Yep.
maps are in there,
That's
I think they're better drastic. Yeah.
supposed to be in there.
So I would add one more person, and you're just finding what these people would do in this role as well. I think
What was that again?
one more group to add would be some representative from one of our commodity groups.
Oh,
And
yeah.
maybe that's, Rachel could help us, either her or identify someone.
I'm glad to sit on.
Okay.
So Britt, do you think we have enough identified for
I
you to
think
move
so.
forward?
We can always add if we, you know, pick up, you know, we'll report out once we meet and whatever. It'll take a little bit of time, I think, to pull together some of this data so we have an effective meeting. But yeah, I think we got a good cross section, so we'll see where it takes us. I'll need to make sure we have all the contact information, so if I send something out, we'll have it ready.
All right, well, I think we accomplished something productive when a group of 25 sitting here, so we earned ourselves a little break. We're gonna take 10 minutes and come back at 10:45. And at that point, we're gonna do something that feels a little bit awkward. It doesn't have a directive goal, but we're basically gonna do the collaborative brainstorming ideation and address some of these parking lot issues that we've come up with. So 10 minutes and back in here, coffee in the back, donuts on the side, get something to eat, drink. And bathrooms are way down the hall and to the left. Past the stairs. Past the stairs. Oh, right down the hall. See what that is?
Yeah.
I do, I didn't really just meet with them or just share.
Well, I saw him on the. invite, so I don't know if it's.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah, if you saw it. Yeah.
That's surprising to me. Connor.org.
That's Charlie, I did see your meeting there. That was good.
Oh, it's gotta be on something. 15,000, because I just Not that you guys don't do a good job.
Yeah.
Good partner.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, I think our list is also really good.
Which is.
I think Katie's ready. I don't know if I am, but Katie's ready.
All right. Well, this room is in use coming at noon, so we will be respectful of that noon deadline. I think there's yoga, so if anyone wants to stay for yoga, I'm pretty sure Tara would let you stay and you'd be invited.
Yeah.
So we're all about holistic, quality here. We're gonna work on water quality and public health and your personal health through yoga. Full setup here today.
Donuts fit right into that.
Willpower and self-control, so what really difficult now they're. Yeah.
I mean, there.
High five, dude.
I got mine too. Okay, so we've got a little over an hour and we're really gonna use this time to start moving into some more of that broad, critical, creative thinking. Some of that was happening as we go. It pretty much always does. So what I've been doing is I've been loosely tracking what we've thought through, what I've put into parking lot issues. When I gently move you along, or when I gently tell work it's time to move on to the next subject. I'm not just saying it's unimportant. I've actually conglomerated these into this list here. So take a minute to look at this list. I understand it's not pretty. But we're not gonna get through all of this, right? There are some things that I think are obvious priorities, but what I'd really like to do here, maybe pick out 2 or 3 of these as a group here in the next 5 minutes and focus in on discussing those items. I'm gonna give you a couple minutes to read through them.
What do you mean by, nitrogen insurance?
By what did I write?
The nitrogen insurance,
Yeah.
conservation
What do you
practice.
mean?
Oh, I can't even see where I wrote that. Isn't that funny? The discussion at the time was the concept of, creating a new practice surrounding the idea that if you could actually get producers to prove that they have reduced the amount of nitrogen they've applied in a year. So say you require them to reduce nitrogen by 10 pounds per acre. You require them to reduce by 10 pounds, we are going to ensure the potential losses on the corn. So you're reducing it and you're gonna, it's a risk. Visually, my corn turns yellow, but I can track that yield differential between year 1 and year 2. Granted, there are factors that are in play and the complication of actually implementing it. That's why we have all these minds in this room, but that was one of the discussions at the time. And I think the last person I talked to about that was actually, Tim Mendorf from CBA, so he might have been the one that was, suggesting it, but I know that discussions happened in different areas as well.
So that goes hand in hand with the credit the producers get when they do a cover crop, right? For their insurance.
It could,
Yeah.
it could, yeah.
If I might just comment, target where funds go, several of those have that in it. You know, and I think that would be a common thing. That's just my observation here.
Okay.
Is trying to get the biggest bang for the buck, because you look at it and say, well, target where you've got, and even like a tracking or nitrogen, you want to target those areas. So how do you bring maybe several of those together so that you can, you know, say, I'm doing the best with the funds I have, how can I target that fund? That's just an observation.
Yeah, I like what Martin said there, because I think several of these, they're really joined at the hip. You can, like the first two, I would say those are this kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and even
We're very closely related.
and
Yeah.
last one, and you got the recharge issue. So it's, to me, that I just want to point out a common theme that's there, if you want to look at some kind of highlight.
I think there's another one there too, when it comes to the communication with the CCAs, the dealers, and then you have sales and messaging. Second from the bottom, you have Clean Water Alliance for Nebraska, that's again, sales and messaging, unless I'm missing something there. We can combine those.
What is the Iowa Clean Water Alliance? Can anybody speak to that?
A nonprofit association of ag retailers and support companies across the state of Iowa. They say we are direct competitors, yet we have a mission to help farmers improve their agronomic performance while supporting environmental improvement efforts. Looks like they have staff and maybe like a board of directors. While monitoring remains Aqua's cornerstone, our mission includes reducing nitrogen and phosphorus loss from farm fields. This led to partnership with a Van County Foundation. It looks like they've got identified different practices that they promote across the state.
Who are the partners? Is like NRCS or Iowa involved in that?
Like the CBAs and Frontiers of Iowa.
So it's commercial.
And then I think later on, they brought in the conservation.
Is that
Are any NGOs involved in that?
the group that also cost shares, through their fertilizer dealerships?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that was the main driver, was to get the co-ops and the CCAs of Iowa on the same page. It's actually led through one of the co-ops and somehow they all still came onto the same page.
Cause I showed Tim the CBA that, and I said, would CBA be willing to do that here in our areas?
And what was his answer?
They never considered it, they never discussed it. So.
Probably about 20 different members. Looks like there's even nationwide insurance company involved. Coke fertilizer, Iowa soybean, Iowa corn, nutrient egg solutions, a couple of different co-ops.
It's the largest provider. Let's just start at the top and quickly go around the room to kind of get your thoughts and relevance to what you see, or what could we expand on these conversations, and then we can circle back around to kind of a broader so that we go through them quick.
Okay, I don't think we have to go through each one individually.
No, we don't. But just takeaways or thoughts around any combination of these or any particular one that stands out to you. So I want to pick on Rachel right off the get-go.
a priority area?
I don't know if it's priority as much as, you know, what do we need? I mean, what do you hear? What do you see from your seats? And do any of these push a button that is A, a priority, or B is you're connected all the way nationally and to some even internationally in terms of what this stuff looks like, but
Well, first off, I would make a small addition. So where you have communication with CCAs and dealers, I would add labs to that.
had what the,
Labs,
labs?
testing labs. So something I've been hearing more and more is just the lack of utilization of end credits, right? A lot of folks, you know, when they get those tests back about, you know, what you need to buy, I think there isn't enough education, there's enough push for that, for folks to understand what's already there, what do I already have? And what can I take away from what that sample told me I need? I think that's a big messaging piece that we're missing.
And the labs don't necessarily match up with their values. So, I had one producer that used one lab 1 year, came out and tested, it was incorrect, so he utilized a different lab the next year.
Well, the inconsistencies across, if I can show you a scattergram, I've been doing it now for 5 years. I send it to 5 different labs and they have 5 different results.
Right.
And so, and the extremes are as much as 20%. So figuring out what that consistency is a challenge, but.
For
but-
what are you talking about? What specifically, a soil sample?
Mhm.
The
Yep.
other messaging piece I'll add, and then I'll hand it to the next, is that idea of nitrogen contamination being a generational issue. I think a lot of folks have the mentality that this is an issue because of what was done by our forefathers. And, you know, they were using the best information they had available at the time. And now we're inheriting that issue. And that's not the case. All of us in this room know that. It is still our issue. And I think communicating that with data is going to be really important. And so I personally am really interested in this Beto zone research space. I think there's a lot of viability there. But from some of the conversations I've had thus far, there's so much complication that goes into standardizing that kind of testing to easily give a grower, you know, that idea of accountability of, am I losing stuff below that root zone? You know, if we can communicate that, yes or no, you are or not, you know, that really tells a grower, is what I'm doing working? You know, blanket regulations or blanket changes to how or when folks apply nitrogen, that doesn't work because their state, as we know, is so diverse. But, you know, do we know? Are we losing it? That's really the question we should be asking, and how do we answer that? I'll stop there.
So to piggyback off of Rachel, I would say from the NRD perspective, our concern is the over application. We know what's going on based on our crop reporting forms in select areas. So what we're focused on is how do we get them to apply at that optimum rate where it's not going to impact their yields, going to reduce their impacts to water quality. We know leaching occurs. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, but how do we reduce that? So what can we put in place to reduce that potential to the leaching of the nitrate? And conservation's great. It has its place as a tool in the toolbox, but ultimately, if we don't get the reduction of nitrate from the get-go, we're never going to address the issue because we're always going to have that leaching.
Looking at the slide up here. Second to the bottom, sales and messaging goes back to, you know, getting the word out, you know, educating people. You know, and not in a demeaning way by any means. Just everybody wants to learn. If you don't learn something new every day, then it's kind of a wasted day. But, you know, if this group and people that are in our industry, you know, just keep messaging in a positive way, we all have to do something. I think that's good.
Things echoing the, words that Barrett said already, and then being myself when I used to be in the field office, it is, taking the time and educating producers, also reaching out to some of the local agronomists. Again, assistance from them. Just from experience, there is, December, January, I went door to door and visited with a lot of producers about, practice we have to reduce atrazine. And we sent out flyers and postcards and very little interest. Went around with about 8 different agronomists in the area, and 2 of them sent people to my office, in the last month of March. And I feel like if I didn't do that, I don't know if we'd be talking maybe about a big sandy NWQI area. There's just not that much interest, and now there's gathering interest again. And also too, they're sort of like what you said, realize it's still an issue and it's our responsibility to address it. We just can't pass it down to the next generations.
Well, again, great things there, how do you sell it to people? That seems what I was focusing on too. It's been discussed a lot, all these great ideas, but how do you get the people to get out there and do it? Nitrogen changes, atrazine changes, Brazil, they got a lot of money and they got it sold there and they could use a lot more money. But some of these other areas, they're kind of wondering, okay, we were successful for WQI in the past, like Wahoo Creek, but those traditional practices, terraces and tile outlets, isn't on the priority list, core list. So how do you bring people in to try something different? Maybe you got to combine some of their more comfortable practices as an incentive, like with the terrace systems, although those aren't the greatest proven for atrazine and E. coli, but maybe do something a little different with those. Look at where they could pass through a grass buffer, combine a couple other practices if they'll try something to get them started. That's just my thought.
I don't want to miss.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the data collection is needed to help get our arms around it and target. I agree with Marty. I think we need to scope in though, when you talk collecting data, they can be massive. So we need to really focus in on where it is that we need to be doing it. I agree that combined with a lot of stuff, we can look at the effectiveness of practices in coordination, maybe with the monitoring right around wellhead areas or something like that, and really focus in, because I think, these small Nebraska towns that are having to spend $1 million plus on water treatment, that's a big deal. I really feel like that we should, if we're gonna target, we can achieve more than one thing, but then also put our targeting where it's really gonna help a lot of the communities. Be my thought there. Just broadly, these conservation practices we're talking about, whether it's cover crops, nutrient management, et cetera, they're proven to work, okay? And there's research all over the nation. You can go to places like the Chesapeake Bay, that's probably 30 years ahead of us on stuff. And they'll tell you that, they mandated nutrient management plans if somebody wanted to buy fertilizer. I'm not saying that's what they should do, but that's where they got to try to get the Chesapeake Bay down, and they still couldn't get the nitrates down until they also then started working with cover crops. So there's proven ways of getting there. But I agree on the second part of it. We're talking about a people problem here. But we've got to make people aware, and then people tend to do things that they're incentivized with doing. And so, we tend to talk about the, nitrogen, and the algorithm and the belief or disbelief in it, and lots of things there with nitrogen, which is the key thing of what we're talking about, if we're talking about groundwater. Farmers have an incentive to be as efficient as possible. I'm just not sure that maybe they have really compared their rates with some other rates to really find out. So I'm talking about, you're at the top of the curve there, Rory, but I'm just saying your average person, if you couple it with that thing on the nitrogen insurance. I actually worked with the Soil and Water Conservation District in Illinois around Decatur. they had a project 20 years ago where they had gotten money. They set it up with an insurance policy. And so these farmers could, what they had to do is they put check strips out of what they normally provide. And then they had to replicate 3 of the university trial, and they were guaranteed if they lost revenue, not lost yield, but you got to take yield and reduce fertilizer. They were guaranteed, so it's risk-free. You can try this, risk-free. That works. That got people to try it, and they knew that there was no downside. In fact, all the upside was theirs, because if they ended up saving money, they were ahead. And they were guaranteed they weren't gonna lose on this proposition. And it was a great way of them demonstrating on their own farm, their own land, their own way of doing things. So I think there's lots of great ideas out there. But ultimately, it comes down to people. How do we reach people? How do we incentivize it so it's in their best interest to operate that way? I think it'll kind of start heading down the right path if we get to those kind of points.
Hi. From my perspective, and I know that we got a lot of focus on commercial fertilizer, but we can't forget the manure for livestock operations. So you got communications with CCAs, dealers. There's also CCAs and dealers that are specific to manure application. We need to make sure we have those people on board. Because, those producers too, there's a lot of times where they're putting on 20, 30, 40 tons per acre. That's a lot, and then they're still putting on the same amount of commercial fertilizers that all they do. So yeah, it gets back to include those people in education.
Yeah, for me, I kind of focus on the first 2 bullets, the 5th bullet, and the last bullet comes out. So yeah, obviously, how do we target the funds? That's a big part of what I'm looking to get from the committee. And, target the funds where they're gonna do the most good, not just where we can spend the money. That's a big difference here. We'll spend the money, we'll allocate the funds, but it needs to be in places that make a difference. And so we do that through ranking tools. We need the input, from the committees and yours, what would make one application rank higher than the other, when we've got 3 times the amount of application. So we get the biggest bang for the buck. So that's important. And then streamlining government, NRCS, kind of caught my eye. We would all love to do that. Not sure exactly where that's coming from, but what I associate with that is I get a lot of feedback and questions about it being so complicated, the paperwork and everything. They don't know, why do I gotta do all this paperwork and things? And I've always wanted to get more feedback, from the producers. And I guess I'd ask this group that if you could give any examples of what kind of paperwork is an issue. I hear it all the time, and it's so complicated, there's so much paperwork. And then, so we kind of go through our little exercise and, what can we cut out and everything. A lot of it is mandated, and there's appropriations law, there's, if you want the money to go to your bank, you're gonna have to fill out 1199. I mean, is that what we're talking about? Or are there things that we can do as an agency to, in the planning process, to help them understand why we need the data, why they need to record, the practice and when it was applied and this kind of thing. So, maybe a little more detail on what that is, if that's where that's going. What can we do for the producers to make it easier, maybe in assistance, that kind of stuff, and there might be some things we can do there. And then the identifying hurdles, absolutely. Why, what seems to be so obvious to me sometimes about, we've got a great practice. Who wouldn't want to do this? But there is, it always come back, and we get a lot of that in CSP, for example. There's practices that all they have to do is continue to do them and they're gonna get funded. They're gonna get some money. You know, the incentive from the taxpayer side, the governmental side is that we're rewarding a producer and we get a guarantee that they're gonna continue to do a practice that is beneficial. But it kind of goes back to bullet 5, we hear a lot. That they say, well, there's so much paperwork and reporting, I'm not gonna do it. So what's a hurdle? I think that's a great question. I guess I would like to know, are there things we can be doing different as we roll the programs out, as we talk about that, as we assess applications, do contracting? What can we do better?
Do you have anything that you want to?
I think Tammy gets a pass.
I would throw out there for you, Brad, that the streamlining government comment came at the last meeting from Debbie Ford as a representative of Pete Ricketts staff. So that was very specific and could have those larger up on high ties for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta just comment that I gotta mimic kind of what Brad said on the specific bullets. There are things that we can internally influence, ranking tools, priorities, I'm all ears on these groups and through our local work groups throughout the state. I'm kind of the guy in the background that directly influences those, hearing these meetings, what's our priorities, what are some good ranking questions and things like that, the truth, the resource concerns, and utilize the practices that have the biggest bang for our buck. I'm after those kind of things and hearing that primarily, but just one comment, we spent the last 2 days up in North Platte, Los Canyons, as part of the forestry state tech subcommittee. And they gave us a tour of the Cedar Canyon Ranch and in the Los Canyons there. And, one of the big takeaways with what works and what's successful in eastern red cedar encroachment, with all the efforts and different groups that are trying to combat that, is what really works is producer led. It's, with prescribed fire and combating the eastern red cedar encroachment, it's neighbors helping neighbors and getting these prescribed fires put on the landscape and joining forces together. So, this group right now, we got 2 producers here today. We're dead. Used to have 1, now we got 2. So, at some point, we need to get some ideas thrown out there or, some producers involved, more producers involved as well to get their ideas and, have them be the ones that are leading this effort going forward. So we need to hear them. It's kind of my main comment at some point.
I say my 2 words for this, and that's stewardship and legacy, is I think all of this accounts for those 2 pieces. And that's why I am so intent on how do we, across all of us, the data side, and how do we start to use the data as a tool and it's siloed. And we all have our priorities. Ryan has them. I mean, we all have our priorities in our silos. And in water management, I've been working on this for 15 years on a soil moisture probe, a weather station, and withdrawals from our groundwater and the application rates and genetics and that system of just application of water. And to me, it's the same thing here. It has taken us nearly that long, and it's frustrating that it took that long that we can all sit around the same table and not throw rocks at Kansas or chastise Colorado for not delivering water to Wyoming.
That's so much fun.
It really wasn't. But the idea that the culmination of a group like this, and I liken it to the IMPs, the integrated management planning process, is this ideation of there's no bad idea in this room. There really isn't. But how do we figure out how to capture those and send the message that there's some opportunity within NRCS to fund some of this stuff. But more importantly is the leadership that it takes, the willingness that it takes to say, we have a challenge. It isn't a problem, it is a challenge. And how do we meet it head on? So that is stewardship to me, and legacy.
Yes, and I'm gonna build on that because I agree with the exact things you said. But my 2 words to go with that would be partnership and communication. Because I think we are primed in Nebraska right now to get some partners working together that we have not had in the past. And I think that communication can support that stewardship and legacy.
I can't top
He
that.
did it all.
Cass.
Ryan, there is no way that you don't have something to add.
People and time, I mean, I've been meeting with farmers past couple of weeks and a lot of them have the tools to do the things, you know they can do better, but you know, when they get in their cab of their tractor to put on even their anhydrous in the fall, you know, if that prescriptive program isn't already in the tractor, they're mad. They're switching through their computer to try to find that thing, and they might have the wrong field in there, but they're gonna be put that anhydrous on. And people in time. So, I don't know.
I don't know. I guess I would echo kind of what Britt said, being a people issue. And I really think that it would be nice to have a human dimensions, someone who specializes in human dimensions, who can, I don't know, we all, like others have said, we all have our own backgrounds. And so it'd be nice to have someone who's able to help us understand, you know, that making that bridge connection between people and our ideas. Ideas and action.
I have just a quick comment. So my background is in public health, and we talk a lot about getting buy-in. And you can think about like the COVID vaccine, like we have all the data, but to get real buy-in, you can't make it data-centered. You have to make it people-centered. And so I totally agree that this is a people issue. And so I was thinking as we're talking through identifying hurdles and making better sales and messaging practices, it kind of sounds like we're all talking about some kind of needs assessment. We can come up with ideas in this room of like, different things, but what are actually the big hurdles? And as we're talking right now, it sounds like we have people who have direct relationships with farmers, or just as Ryan was saying, getting the technology and the tractor and stuff. So I'm wondering, like, if we could create some type of initiative or focus on putting together, like, because needs assessments don't always need to be like a hard survey. They could be through conversations or different ways. So putting together something of like, these are the biggest needs I'm seeing in my NRD or in most of my conversations. And so next time we come back together, we can talk about maybe next steps, where to go off of that needs assessment. So something maybe a little more formal, because we have a lot to talk about right now. People are coming up with all these different ideas, and what they hear, but actually getting that written down, I think maybe could help guide us in where we want to go, and maybe where we want to start with some of these practices. Because maybe our messaging is just confusing and people don't know how to navigate the DEE website because it's complicated and confusing. So
Nobody knows how to do that.
yeah, so maybe we need to rethink that, and maybe that's a big barrier. So that's just a thought I had.
Okay, I think one of the things you should have education of your agronomists, because I would say 60% of your farmers has a agronomist with a seed company or a co-op. And all they talk about is chemicals, what you can use and so forth. I think education has to be done there because the farmer will listen more to the agronomist of his choice. And that they're all on the same page. Also, I whatever project or way you go, I'm gonna have to agree with Britt that there, for a farmer to use or do this, gonna have to be some insurance or whatever before he's going to even try. So, that's my 2 cents as a farmer.
So if I could summarize that, the education agronomist, so that would be trusted stakeholders or advisors and identifying that list of who they are. I mean, even beyond, would that be fair? We both take notes and then we kind of compare what we've heard.
And I don't always explain it good either.
Okay.
Share for a second.
Yeah.
As I know my son always has, from a seed company, and the agronomists come out, he'll always call them before he, with a chemical, if it's too late, too early. Because every area is different when they plant or when they, on your soils. So, it has to be more localized type person.
I think Connor's got to do it.
So to your point and to what Laura said, both of you, there was a study called Useful to Usable that came out of sustainablecorn.org. It was led out of Indiana, but we did a significant amount of research here in Nebraska, and it identified who farmers are listening to when they're making decisions. And this is one of the things that got adopted into the Nebraska non-point source pollution plan, but it's used in states in different various ways all along. But what you're saying about education for that person, or what Laura was saying about the needs assessment and the barriers, they actually identified all this maybe 7-8 years ago. But it is after family. The people that farmers are listening to in the state are chemical dealers, seed dealers, and consultants. I hate to say it, but extension is like halfway down the list, and conservation staff is way at the bottom of the list. So sometimes that we have these resources and we just need to tap into them as we have these discussions.
Your extension agents move around too much. And so they don't get, the farmer don't get
Right.
used to them.
Right.
Be able to ask them questions, so.
And that has been a change for us in the more recent years, as the demographics of what we get from extension agents changes. So we do have areas of the state where we are exceptionally strong and have long-term relationships. But yeah, sometimes it's a matter of who the messenger is and who we target for education. So I just wanted to share with you all that a lot of this information exists, and there was a significant amount of time and money put into this work with Focus Global. It's got something similar for Nebraska.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Chris,
And
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's from the same, Linda Procopi is the one that led it, but it's the same study, yeah. Thank you, Connie.
You ready?
Sure.
No pressure.
Really, probably nothing too differs from what's been said, I think. The hurdle is selling your concept, selling the ideas. But you've got to have, obviously, the data to do it. And, you need something to show that we just don't have for the general public. We don't have the time. The issues we're dealing with took decades to get to this point. They're not gonna go away overnight. And showing some, I think the long-term buy-in for this stuff is not just showing that you're not gonna lose any money or you might save a couple bucks, and that's whether we're talking to the farmer, or if we're talking to the person in my neighborhood who's dumping a bag of fertilizer every month on their yard and watering every day, if they could. The mindset has to change, and for that, I think it has to go further than the money, kind of like we're saying, you've got to make it personal. Somebody has to be able to connect with this and see, showing us you're not losing money, okay, that's great. But if you show somebody you're gonna break even, well, if that's the case, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing because it works. But so there's not that real personal connection to that. I think you gotta show that it actually is working. And, that's gonna take, it goes back to targeting the areas. And where do you get the data from to make that impact the quickest? And I don't know. Part of it goes back to the question that can't be answered. It's hard to answer as far as the recharge. Look at the areas where the water's coming from, look at the geology. If we could identify some of these areas where you could have an impact sooner, or it's not gonna take 10, 20 years, maybe somewhere in an area where that recharge is happening faster, you could have that impact quicker, and you would have that information to show somebody sooner, and then get people in that area involved, I think once you've got that kind of information, the dollar savings is fine, the yield are great, but, I think if you're gonna look at something to change something, they need to see that long term, like the list of people listening to, well, they're not listening to us as a regulator, a government agency. They're listening to their neighbors, they're listening to, the people they have these long relationships with, get those people, and you find those areas, and I think you find those influential individuals to get on board first. And then if you can make things happen, I think that's where it works, but yeah, it's time. We're not dealing with something that's gonna happen overnight. We're not in a world where people are willing to wait 5 minutes for anything. So I think the quicker we can show something, if it's possible to target an area where we can get those results quicker, I think that would be place to look.
I'll go along with that, like over in Iowa, they do a certain project that they're really like in a smaller area, get farmers in a small area to show that it is the right thing to do. Maybe not, all over the state, just certain areas that we need first and then expand later.
Kansas has limas across the whole state. They're the demonstration farms that are participating producers, but they're well funded and well participated in from agency to producer led. So it's been very successful. The state of Kansas is significantly invested in them. Marty?
I got a feeling that my fingerprints are on the recharge thing on this, so, and Andy did a good job of doing that, but, then, mentioning about, targeting funds and so forth. So, a question that I struggle with is, what is the true cost of nitrates and who pays for it? That's a huge problem out there. We've got some people that say, don't tax me, but yet that nitrate legacy is being picked up by people that didn't cause the problem. Then if we try to put tax dollars into that system, then sometimes it just goes and it may not be headed in the right direction. So that's where the recharge comes in. So I would sum up my concern is we've got to find the true cost. And I know that talking to farmers, producers that are in our wildlife protection area, and you start talking about, things like uranium being released and the health costs that are coming up. When they're making decisions, they're not taking into account all of the information that's out there. And when you put up this graph that says much of the information comes from family, I'm thinking, I wouldn't trust my family. They don't have all the information they got out there. Okay. So we obviously aren't doing a very good job of giving the knowledge to the people that need to be making these decisions. And I don't know that any of us have all those answers. But what I can see is it's far more complicated. And you talk to somebody that has had a health issue or cancer, and if it is truly connected to the agricultural activities that we have, they would tell you that it would be priceless to change that, but we don't know all of that. I mean, there's still a lot of unknowns. So I'll just sum it up. We need to figure out what is the true cost and who's paying that cost. And then that way we can target that funding and so forth that we need to do and make real change. If you can show that there is a human cost and a financial cost, and we can get to those, I think that's a key thing. So I don't want to be a downer, but that's where I'm coming from.
I have to ask before we move on, have you ever been contacted by Harshini? We have a postdoc at the BWFI, Water for Food, and she
was out and I had a nice visit with her.
perfect, and that is what
She-
the postdoc is.
Yeah, and that's what
determining
her
the
focus is,
Yep.
and she obviously had been talking to Dave Mesbach. And I think she was overwhelmed by the time she got done, so I tried to tell her, drive back to Lincoln, think about it, but come back.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, yes. So I'm trying to get that information out, and I think she's got some good ideas too, so it's a good thing, a lot of people like her.
Really?
We got a lot of smart people sitting around the table, a lot of technical expertise. But I think we're trying to solve a sociologic problem with technical solutions. I heard the terminology yield rather than profitability. Britt, I think Britt, you're against the wall over there, your back is against the wall. Actually, I agree with you very much. If we look at a problem like this, you can throw all the technical stuff, all the information you want at it. And you talked about an incentive, right? And my farmer friend, I grew up on a farm, talks about incentive. What do you call an incentive against an incentive? Disincentive? If you look at farming and agriculture, especially crops. Roy, I got a question for you. Is there crop insurance for popcorn?
Yes,
Yeah, you bet there is. This goes all the way back to the '70s.
but the only way that you can get it is it has to be contracted. That's the only
That's
way
right.
you can get crop insurance.
And what else you have to do about that?
What do you have to do? You have to develop a relationship.
And you have to prove your yields,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Farm Bill ever since the 1970s of Earl Butz. To give crop insurance because it's all about risk management. It's all about total production. There was nothing in there about efficiency. So if you look at the trend line from the 1970s all the way to now, everything has been geared towards total production. Regardless of profitability, total production. So the incentive for the ag producer today to prove your yields, that has to go to FSA every year of total production. It's not about efficiency. And we know on a nitrogen curve, total production does not equal total profitability or maximum profitability. So if you think about this, we have designed a system that rewards total production, which means pour as much input into it as you can to get people to change. Number one, you have to clearly define what you want that change to be. I mean, clear, not let's just lower nitrate levels. No, what practice, what are you going to do specifically? And number two, and I'm going to come back to you, Roy, there has to be an emotional hook. Your emotional hook is stewardship and legacy. That's what speaks to your heart. But that's not the same for everybody in the room. But yet, to get effective change, you have to hook the emotional hook. How do you hook their hearts? And then number three, you have to make it as easy as
possible. Not, we'll do this, but you have 16 more forms, you gotta go 3 different agencies and we'll give you this money. Ain't gonna happen. So in this whole group, I says, where's your rural sociologist? Because you're dealing with a human issue. You're not really dealing, it's manifesting itself as a technical issue. But the incentives, if you go back to crop farming, and I grew up on a mix, and why do you think all the fence rows are gone? About risk management. It's all about risk management. And what's the risk management tool we use? Crop insurance. And crop insurance is based on total maximum production. So I've been having this discussion. My classmate from CDC is actually Ali Khan at the School of Public Health at UNMC. And I said to Ali, I said, Ali, you know, I'm not going to argue correlate. I'm an epidemiologist. I'm not going to argue causation, correlation, any of that stuff. But when you write these articles, don't shoot at the producer because they're just following what the policy has been, what the market signals are. These are good people. But to stay in business, this is what they've had to do. If you want to publish those articles, then shoot at the policy. Because the only way we're going to change this is if we change the incentives. So minimize risk. So we're going to do the planting of the strips or whatever the change. Nebraska Extension, Nebraska Ag Research Division has the largest on-farm research program in the country. And I would maintain the best. And they're doing research all over the state, local results. And we don't get a dime for selling a pound of fertilizer or an ounce of chemical. But as I look at this, I've been thinking about this for a long time. We're trying to deal with a sociologic problem with technical solutions. And until we get to the sociologic problem, and it's not a problem, but this has been in place for 50 years. If you truly want to change this, you need to think about, we can do all these things and we're going to need to. But it's going to continue until we get back to the real reason we're trying to get maximum production. If we can fix that, then these will work. But until you fix that, you're just going to deal with symptoms the rest of your life.
So don't irrigate, don't apply nutrients.
Oh, no, didn't say that.
No, but I mean, the behavioral change in irrigation management, it was the same thing until innovation is at the speed of light. The technology that has come on irrigation management, all the research has been done. Now we have the tools to measure it in real time. But it was actually getting a producer. It's still the cheapest thing to apply was water. And so you push that button and we have low cost, we have rural power, we have low rates, and why wouldn't we? And we're the #1 irrigated state and we have water.
But what's the major push? Total production.
Yep.
That's how you get your risk management is by total production.
It's going to change the behavior, that social part. I couldn't agree with you more.
I want to make sure that what I've been asking people, because I'm trying to understand, and you're the first person that I've spoken with, that have talked about this yield and the policy and those things. And I remember my grandfather and my father talked about the cheap food policy for Earl Butts. Believe it or not.
They were Butts farms.
They were, yes, and it was all about that we're going to feed the world with a cheap food policy. And they would complain about it because they're saying, well, geez, the prices are down, so they needed help to make sure they could build these yields up. So I asked the question when, people let me talk is, it's getting less and less, but whatever. But anyway, I asked the question, isn't the federal government responsible for some of this nitrate legacy because of the cheap food policy that we've had? Okay. And so I asked the question, when we send food overseas, are we not taking into account the environmental damage that has occurred because of the cheap food policy? So who's paying for this?
Well, and
am I asking the right question? That's, I guess, what I want to know. Or am I somehow mixed up with that?
I'll step off my chair as the Dean of Extension, and now I just answered as Dr. Charlie. Okay, because I view this as a person, so yeah, this is a sociology, this is a societal issue.
Yes.
Because this has been in place in society, that you paid for it this way, you establish the policy, this is what we're gonna do. So that's only as personal, Dr. Charlie. Now I get back in extension, I say, I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, well, and I took my question a little bit further and say, but now we have more modern, policies that say, we gotta produce as much corn as we can because we want energy independence. So we don't care what the cost is, get those yields up because we want that price of gasoline to go down. I'm saying, so who's paying for that?
All right, we've got 15 minutes left and we have a handful, plus there's some.
I apologize.
No.
But I just want to point out, I think these are great comments that have bothered me.
That's why we're here.
Boy, just my luck to get stuck behind the two brilliant guys.
Not really.
My ideas aren't going to seem very wonderful here. Targeting is important. Brett's committee is doing that. Speaking of brilliance, did anybody notice as soon as Charlie mentioned popcorn, he started smelling it? He's got some influence here.
It's your iPhone. Yes.
The sales and messaging, you've heard me say that before, but yeah, I think that's important, particularly keeping these issues in front of the farmers. I've had farmers that I've known and worked with for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And they said that, when you first started banging this drum, nobody wanted to listen. But if they keep hearing it enough, keep hearing it enough, keep hearing it enough, it does start to sink in. Not for everybody, but it does. And that's part of the philosophy while we're putting this drinking water specialist position in, is to just get out there and get in people's faces and keep reminding them that this is important.
Dick, real quick, I see Lower Platte South doing that very well at a different level. Commercials on TV with younger generations.
Yeah.
And we see other schools involved in watersheds, and suddenly you get to that heart issue, the personal level, the social level.
Yeah.
Thinking, oh, if my grandkids and kids are out there in the summer sampling a creek, or they're on, volunteering time on a commercial to get that, maybe there is an issue. Maybe there's something else we should focus on. I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine, Tom, because I was just gonna mention that. Charlie mentioned the emotional hook, and everything he said was good. But the other emotional hook that we're starting to hear a lot about, and we have heard about it, but it's really starting to dig in, is the public health aspect of this. The work that the Med Center is doing, that's really starting to get people's attention. So I think that would be something that I would add to your list up there, Katie, is the public health aspect of this. Evaluation data, just real quickly. Yeah, I'm a Vadostone guy. We implemented a Vadostone program at Lower Platte South about 10 years ago. It has done some good stuff. I've worked with Dan Snow at the university on that, but it's expensive. It's energy intensive. It's time intensive. Number one, getting the land access to do the sampling. Rourke, you mentioned water sampling, and we do need to keep doing that, even though we've got a lot of data on it. But going out and grabbing the water sample is comparatively easy compared to getting deep data on those samples. And part of the big problem with that too is you've got to deal with that geologic variability. Okay, you go out and do one deep data sample in the middle of a 160 acre pivot, it's going to give you some data, but it doesn't address that geologic component. Again, I'm wearing my geology hat here. So if we're going to do this sort of stuff, and I think the Vadostone analysis is one of the best ways we can demonstrate what we're doing is having an effect. Buckle up. We need a lot of money. We need a lot of bodies. We need a lot of machinery to do that, and it ain't going to be easy. So finally, let's see. Oh, the other thing, we've heard a lot about irrigation management, and that is certainly great. I grew up on irrigated farm in western Nebraska, but have now working with Lower Platte South NRD. I would just also recommend that we don't forget about rain-fed areas. Again, some of the Vadostone work that we've been doing in Lower Platte South, there's as much buildup of nitrate in the Vadostone underneath dry land, particularly in the eastern part of the state, as there is under some Roeric's irrigated ground. So we need to be conscious of coming up with ways to help dryland farmers manage their applications when we don't have that extra tool or problem of irrigation. So that's all I do.
So the list is pretty pretty all in. One thing that I would feed upon whatever everyone said, there is a lot of research out there showing that cover crops do its job. There's a new study out by Javed in regards to alfalfa. If we could do alfalfa as a cover crop, then, oh my gosh, 3 years of alfalfa in a field might make a difference, a big difference. One of the biggest things is building that relationship with producers. I've talked to a lot of producers, and right now there is a changing of the guard amongst the farmers. So the older ones are giving their farms up to the younger ones. The younger ones are more geared for technology, different way of farming. We're probably going to have robotics coming into play within the next decade, quite a bit. Looking at going back to the smaller versions of the equipment, so they're not compacting the soil. So soil health plays a big role in regards to what you are putting on your ground, and will affect cover crop success. So it's a lot of variability in regards to all of it. But we've got a chance right now to adjust this younger generation of farmers. And I think we really need to pivot toward that. The ones that I've talked to, I met with a producer family. And the youngest one there did not say one word. He sat there. He wanted to because I started talking about irrigation management, because we're gonna actually control the nitrate leaching. We're also gonna have to control the amount of water applied. So water irrigation management is going to become a big tool. If the production of corn that can actually store nitrate in its leaves is a possibility coming up in the genetics part of it. And if it can bypass the want and need of no GMO to feed the world, I think there's a lot of policy changes that are going to have to occur. But it is a larger picture. It's not just one thing. It's not just a farmer doing the same thing over and over and over and over. There's a lot of social economics that affect how a farmer will farm. I have a new producer group going, and what I got out of that is that they're grouped together. They're not being paid to do their cover crops. But one of the biggest things that they would like to see is because they're the multi-grain session after a 3-year of basic, the basic is just not long enough. And for them to be forced to go into the multi-grain, they're just seeing the seed clubs get richer and richer. And in regards to the crop consultants and the agronomists, they have one thing on their agenda, and that's to keep their job. So they'll make that farmer happy if they give them 40 more pounds per acre, as long as there's no leaves that are turning yellow. So you have to look at it in the perspective of who's saying what and who's doing what. And that goes back to building a relationship. So your individual that you're hiring has to know how to hook point that emotional, because we can't keep going with this blame game. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. It was your grandfather's fault, because it's all our problem. It's all our faults. Whether it's groundwater or whether it's surface water, I see tiled fields contaminating ditch lines that run right next and right into around municipalities. Are those being tested? I don't think so. I don't think we have regulations that test that water. But it's going to take all of us. So every one of you.
7 minutes divide between the three of you.
I get Albert's time.
Go.
Okay, so first, I'm the producer before I'm an employee. And I will always be way more producer than employee. I was also a special ed teacher, where we spent a lot of time writing individual education plans for children based on a team of testing and a team of people coming together with the student and the family. So I feel like that sometimes is really beneficial experience when you're dealing with farmers. And then I also worked for a nonprofit organization that provided statewide education events for farmers in Colorado and Kansas. And we would have 500 people at those conferences to learn about conservation. And a lot of that conservation was not happening under contract with any agency. They were learning about it themselves, they were implementing it themselves. When I worked for the organization in Colorado, we did evaluations every year, and we got to the point where we were asking them, where did you get the most information? And they were saying, farmers. They're not listening to the extension agents or the universities or whatever. They were listening to other farmers because the farmers were not selling them anything. Like you guys had all mentioned that. So I understand that when you're talking about programming and how do we get more people into the programs and spend the money, maybe that's not what we need to be thinking about. Maybe we need to be thinking about how do we educate them so they can do it on their own. And you had said, all they have to do is fill out paperwork to keep getting paid, but they don't want to do that. So I think a lot of it is that, bills of messaging and education and how we educate those producers. And I think there's some really, really great producers in every part of the state that can do that. If we could harness that power and then support it somehow. But, yeah, I took all kinds of notes and some of you saw I was over here. So yeah, so that, I think it's all connected, but I think that's gonna be a huge thing for our buck is getting the education piece together.
I've been in the non-point source program for 32 years, I guess. And I think from day one, I looked at this and said 90% of our job is social, psychological. Handing out money to cost shares is the easy part. Getting the change is sociological change, psychological change. So I really emphasize that. On the first bullet, you got up there data. We've evolved our, at least in the surface water area, way we're monitoring, and with our basin rotation now, we just keep tweaking it every year. So all of our NWQI projects on surface water, we've now got a strategic monitoring plan on those where we're bracketing the area that we're working on so we can measure water coming in and water going out and have a direct measure of the impact of stuff that's going on the ground. Up to that point, we depended on ambient monitoring site, and some of our project areas were 30, 40, 50 miles away from that monitoring site. There's no way that we're going to measure a change from that distance, but we're starting to meet that where we're actually monitoring where we're working. We've also started now with basin rotation. We're looking at areas where we could potentially have projects, and we're starting to put strategic monitoring sites around those watersheds. We may not get there for 10, 15 years, but when we do get there, we're going to be able to say we've got data within 5 miles. We're going to be putting a project in. So we're on that trajectory. So I'll leave it there. I've been trying for 15 years for a human dimensions position, so it took me 10 years to get Katie's position, so I'm still working.
I'm just gonna leave it simple. I think responsiveness is one of the things that's most difficult with all of the things we've talked about. Is keeping the continuity, everything flowing and being responsive to the need. I'm gonna make it specific with NRCS. Sometimes the program just doesn't work for somebody and that's what pushes them away. And it's hard to be responsive because of your limitations. And it's sociology, we have limitations ourselves, potentially, that make responsiveness difficult or within our entities. So finding a way to change and be responsive, I think that's gonna be one of the biggest hurdles. Doing all these things you've all talked about.
We are at time. We have 1 minute. I apologize to those online, but I'll just say it's a benefit for being here.
All right, so, to wrap us up, this is a good start to a discussion of the parking lot issues. I hope everyone feels like you got an opportunity to at least begin to share, your thoughts for how we move forward. With this committee, what we'll be doing is we'll meet again here in the next 4 to 6 weeks. We'll get you a date once we work that out. There will be work done in the meantime with the source water protection work group. And obviously things that we'll share back out will get shared out from NRCS. After this meeting, we will provide you the notes from Tammy because she has worked really hard to get, like, her fingers are flying
Gotta be
over
hurt.
there. And what we'd like to do is like to provide for some time like this in each one of these meetings so that we have more ability to do in-depth discussion. So when we follow up with the notes in the next couple of weeks, you will also get a survey to help us prioritize what we discuss at these meetings, along with these notes. And then we'll just encourage you to think about if your priority that you would like to discuss best fits within this committee. One of the great things about this committee is the breadth that we are developing and the broad spectrum that we are getting by participation. But we are also bound by the concept that this really is in NRCS water quality subcommittee. So we have certain variables and directions and confines that direct us. So
Think about practices, if there's new or emerging practices. And the combination of those from a system approach and what impacts in each and every area. Cause I think that is invaluable, is thinking forward on how we can help to start to do some of these things.
Brad, or anything else to add?
The only thing is, I think you hit everything on the head. I like the idea of trying to target and prioritize the topics as we move forward, and I just appreciate everybody's input. You've got a lot of good work going on with NWQI and source water protection. That's the programmatic side, but this committee is a lot bigger than that. It's the data and sociology, sociological and all that, so just thanks for being here.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you all.
Yoga is next, so get ready.